no guns except 350s in the tail. And the Japs didn't know that, fortunately, because sometimes they'd send fighters up and they'd stay away from us. They'd fly out of range alongside, but if they made any passes, they were making them from some distance. And we flew individually. We took off 30 seconds apart, and we flew each plane individually. We didn't fly formation. So we were strung out a long ways. And this night that we made that last mission, we flew over Tokyo and blacked it out. Well, later on, I read some book, and I don't remember even what it was, but there was a German, actually a spy, that was a big friend of people in Tokyo, and he wrote this book afterwards. The military didn't want to surrender. They wanted to keep on fighting and make America come into Tokyo, you know, with forces to take it. Mm-hmm. And they figured they could beat us there on Tokyo grounds. So all the top brass had decided they were going to capture Tito, or not Tito, the Emperor, and keep him from making that speech in the morning, making the surrender talk. Well, when we flew over Tokyo, we blacked it out, and because we had such a long range of planes flying over, they kept it blacked out, and they couldn't find him. And he got to make the surrender the next morning. So this is why they said the B-29 that ended the war.
Good. Well, let's back up a bit, and 1310, 20 December 2000, interview of Mr. Preston M. Kranz. Interviewer is Lieutenant Colonel Robert von Hassel. Location is Latham, New York. Press, tell me about before you came into the service. Where were you born?
Well, I was born in Germantown, down in Columbia County, and I went through high school there, and then I went to the University of Alabama, and I left the university after 2 years. It was the same class of the great coach there for many years, Bear Bryant. We were classmates, and I played some basketball and some baseball there. Then I came home and I signed up for flying cadets at Randolph Field in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. And I went in I guess it was August, I don't remember now for sure, and went to San Antonio and Randolph Field. And the recruiting officer here in Albany, he was so anxious to recruit somebody that he sent me off a week early. I got down there a week before the class started, and they put me up on the top floor of the barracks and said, "Don't go out of here and don't let anybody see you, because it's going to be rough later on and they'll really get on you." So I spent a week there, going into town every day and staying out of the people's eye. And then started classes in flying. And I was the first one in my class to solo. I soloed with 3 hours and 26 minutes instruction. And I had acrobatics in before any of the rest of the crew started. But I ended up, I flunked 2 classes. I didn't have any background in mathematics, and that really fixed me in there. But they told me that I was such a natural pilot that they wanted to keep me there and get Washington to okay my taking the course over again. But they did give me a makeup test, and of course we were on the honor system. And the lieutenant left 2 books on the table when I took the test. And I thought, you know, we're on the honor system. And I don't know why he left those books there, whether they were meaning me to look up the answers or not, but I said, no, we're on the honor system, so I didn't use them. And I washed out. Then in 1939, I received a letter from the Army Air Force. They were going to start schools for bombardiers and navigators, but they weren't ready at that point. And they wanted to know if I would come back. And I said, sure. So I was more or less committed then. And then the British Air Force contacted me. They wanted to sneak me across the border because Roosevelt had made the law that if you went to fly for a foreign country, you lose your citizenship. And I dearly wanted to go, but I couldn't lose that citizenship. Well, I found out afterwards I wouldn't lose it anyway. So I turned that down, and then in, I guess it was again August of '41, they were ready, and we went to Maxwell Field, Alabama, and we went in as upperclassmen because they were beginning to start to bring in other cadets as lowerclassmen. So we went in there as upperclassmen, and we did our primary schooling there. And in, I guess it was November of '41, we were sent to Albuquerque for our final training, and of course we were there Pearl Harbor Day, and I graduated on March 7th of '42 as a second lieutenant in the reserve. And at that time they had a law that if you were a reserve officer and you served on active duty, there was a $500 bonus for each year you served on active duty. And a couple of months after that, they decided there were going to be a lot of them, and they cut that law out, so I ended up drawing that when I got out. I came off active duty, well, first, everybody in my class went as instructors because they were open new fields and they needed instructors to instruct new cadets. I was sent to Victorville, California, which was a brand new base up in the Mojave Desert. And I think it was in July. At that time in Victorville, I had charge of the bomb trainer department. And I had 3 master sergeants, one with 26 years, one with 22, and one with 18, that were there. And when they told me that I was going to take over that department at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I didn't know anything about it. So the next morning I walked in and the 3 sergeants were there, all ready for me. And they said, "What do you want us to do, Lieutenant?" I said, "Well, you run the place. I don't know anything about it. And when I get to know something about it, I may have some ideas, and I will talk with you then about them. In the meantime, any papers that I have to reports I have to make, you make them, and I'll sign them, and we'll get along fine." And then, I guess it was July, they were opening a new field at Hobbs, New Mexico. And a Major Wilson was going down there. He was a pilot. He was going down there to take over the bomb training thing. And he called me up and he said, "How would you like to go to Hobbs with me?" I said, "I don't know. I got to think about that. I just got this place running good where I don't have to work 18 hours a day, and He said, I'll call you in the morning. So he called me in the morning and he said, have you made up your mind? And I said, yes, I have. I'm going to stay here. He said, go home, pack your bags. You're gone. I drove from Victorville to Hobbs, and all they had were two little buildings. One was the headquarters, and the other one was the construction building. And the rest of the stuff was just stakes in the ground. They didn't have power, they didn't have water, they didn't have anything. And that was in July, and the first part of September we took our first class of cadets. They didn't have the field built, of course. We didn't have any runways, so we used to take off and land on the ramp in front of the hangars. And we didn't have any radio. We put a plane out in the middle of the field and keep it running and use that as a control. And we graduated one class of cadets. And then they transferred us to Denny, New Mexico. And they made Hobbs a training for B-17s pilots. So they only put one class through there, and we did all the work, and the B-17 boys took over. And we went to Deming, and I was, again, in charge of the bomb trainer department. I had two hangars full of bomb trainers. And the colonel there had told us that if we would stay there for 18 months, then we could get out and go to combat if we wanted to. Well, I put in my 18 months, and the B-29s were just beginning to start. They didn't have any in action yet, but they were building them, and they were training people. So I went to him, told him I want to go to B-29s, and he tried to talk me out of it, and I said, well, you said 18 months, now you got to keep your promise. So they let me go, and they sent me up to Lincoln, Nebraska for assignment, and I ended up in B-24s in Mountain Home, Idaho. And I was quite upset. So there was a major who was in charge of the training there, and I knew him, and I got on the base and I found out he was there, and I drove right down to his office, and he said, what are you doing here? I was a captain then. I said, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be in B-29s, and I want out of here as fast as I can get out. And while we were talking, he got a telephone call from a Colonel Gurney. And Colonel Gurney was in my lower class at Randolph Field. And he was looking for people to staff the 16th Bomb Group, but they were forming a 16th Bomb Group. And he said, well, Colonel, I got a guy right here who wants out of here, wants to go to B-29. And he said, who is it? And he told him. He said, I'll cut the orders. So I spent 5 days at Mountain Home, and then I was on my way to Texas, to Dalhart, Texas, to join the group. And we didn't have, we were at an adjacent field to Dalhart. They had a runway and a vacant tower there, and it was forming the group, so we had problems getting our flying time in. Now, every plane that I had been with, the pilots knew I could fly, so I got a lot of hours in. I couldn't claim any of it, but I got a lot of hours in. I even got a solo of an AT-11 twin-engine Beechcraft, which we were using for bombing. I flew it a lot, and one day the captain said, here, I'm going to solo you. I said, you're nuts. If I crack it up, your career is over. He said, I'm not worried about that. So we needed flying time, and we had to go over to the main base to get a plane, and we went over, I don't know, it was 15 or 20 of us, I guess, got on the plane to get in some flying time, and we got an engine that went on fire, and we had to come in and land and get another plane. And we had to stay in a small corridor. So we're just sitting up there, you make a turn, straighten up, make a turn, straighten up. We're going to do this for 4 hours. And after we had been flying for a while, the pilot called down to me and said, "You got a stabilizer up there in the nose?" I said, "No, we don't." "Oh," he said, "I can't put this on automatic because no stabilizer." And I said, "Well, if you're tired, I'll fly it for a while." Well, he said, "Come on up, put me in the co-pilot seat." And I flew for 15, 20 minutes, I guess. And boy, he said, "Hell, you can fly." So he went down the nose, and the 2 pilots are down the nose taking a nap, and I'm flying around for a while. I guess I flew for a couple hours or so, and I was getting tired. So I called down to him, and about this time I'm approaching that base we got over there. And oh, they said, "You're doing all right." So I thought, okay, I'll fix you. And I got over that runway, and I stuck the nose down, put all 4 right to the wall. Went down in there and pulled it up, and I made a chandelle off that tower when I went by. And when I popped it at the top, I had 2 pilots in a hurry. Boy, I'll tell you. But then we went to, we formed a group there. We didn't have any crews or anything, and we were transferred up to Fairmont, Nebraska. And we started our training for overseas. And because we were going to be flying radar with no guns, and the type of bombing we were scheduled to knock out Japan's oil fields. We were a top secret outfit. In the meantime, the atomic bomb crew outfit, they were over at another field training. And then we had another outfit at another place that was training. And it was between them and us as to who was going to bomb the oil fields and who was going to put in the Shimonoseki Straits. We're going to put depth charges down in there. But we went out, so they were left to the Shimonoseki Strait deal, and we got the oil fields. We flew. Japan had 12 major oil refineries and depots and that stuff. And with 15 raids, we had 12 of them 90% or better destroyed. And we got presidential citation. And we also got the Air Force, or the Army Air Force's most productive wing, bombing wing. I was the squadron, the 16th Squadron Bombardier, and we couldn't fly as a, the staff couldn't fly as a crew. So you had to get a flight whenever you could. Usually it was to replace one that was sick or ill or something. I got 5 missions in out of the 15. And this last one, I wasn't on that mission, but I was there when they came home. And I think they flew almost 18 hours. But most of our missions lasted, I think the shortest one was 12 hours. And of course, you had about 6,000 miles over sea, which I know one night I was on a mission, and coming back, we were notified that one of our planes had gone down. And they wanted us to monitor it as long as we could. Well, on these missions, they only gave us 15-minute leeway on gas. And so you couldn't stick around too long. But when we got to the area, there was a Navy ship there, and they had all big bright lights on. And I saw them pulling somebody up out of the ocean, out of a raft over the side of the ship. excuse me. Back when we were in Fairmont, and we were beginning to put crews together, the colonel and I sat down with a list of pilots, bombardiers, navigators, and he wanted me to help him pick, you know, anybody that we knew that was good. So I picked a pilot and 2 bombardiers that I recommended to him. And one of the guys that I picked went down in the ocean that night. And he and the navigator had been very good friends. They were both married, and they rented a house together. And the navigator went out with the plane ahead of him, and Rex could hear him calling to him in the water, but he couldn't find him in the dark, and the seas were running a little high. And that really blew his mind. He went all to pieces. And he wouldn't get up out of bed, and he wouldn't do anything. Of course, the war was over after that, shortly. And the doctors wanted to send him home. And I said, no, if he goes home like this, he's not going to recover back home. I'll get him straightened out here. So I went over one morning, and I went up one side and down the other, and of course I'm his friend, and I made him angry. And then I told him, I don't care if you fly again, but you're getting paid and you're going to do work. So you report to me tomorrow morning in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, and I'm going to find a job for you. And I put him to work with 3 enlisted men who were the best thieves that I ever saw in the Army. You give them a truck and you didn't know what the hell they were coming home with. And he worked with them, and then he got around, and one day he said, I'd like to try to fly. I said, okay. So I arranged with a crew to take him up. Well, he got as far as the plane, and he couldn't get on board. So I said, okay, we'll wait and try it again. So maybe a week or so later, he said, I want to try it again. So he did, and he got on, and he flew. Then I sent him home. He's still my good friend. He lives in Prescott, Arizona, and he sends me something to read every other thing that he gets out of a magazine or something. But only 3 of them were recovered. 7 of them died in the plane. Then I stayed in for a year, and living condition, I was married then. I married before I went overseas. Then I decided that the living conditions were bad. I was at Salina, Kansas, and the townspeople, they didn't want you around town anymore, and they just made it rough on us. And so I said, well, I'm going to come off active duty. I've had enough. I was a major then, and I came off active duty and came home, found a job. And there was no reserve here in Albany at the time, and so you were on inactive reserve also. And then they called me down to New Paltz to a field down there. What's it?
At Newburgh?
Yeah,
Stewart?
Stewart, yeah. Yeah, Newburgh, not New Paltz. They wanted me to take command of the reserve unit there, and at that time I was putting in a lot of 18-hour days, and I just couldn't do it. So I turned it down, and that was a big mistake for me. So then I came out, and I volunteered to go back in the Korean War. I went down, took a physical, and they turned me down. Said I had sinus. Well, I flew with sinus ever since 1936. They wouldn't take me back. Then they offered me an honorary reserve, no pay, but all the other stuff, access to fields and all that. I don't know. Back here a few months ago, I lost my wallet, and it had all of my papers in it. And I thought, how am I going to get that back? And I have a friend, I don't know, you may know him, Jack Clark, attorney. He's stationed here in Albany. And I called him he's a full colonel, called him to see if he could find out how I could get it back. And he said nobody'd ever heard of it. So
That's very interesting.
then one day I got a call from the post office. They had found all my cards. It was in a plastic bag dumped in one of their bins. So I got everything back. But then I found the orders that authorized this. So I guess I could have gotten it back anyway. But then I went to work for General Motors, and I retired from there in '74. I spent a couple of years with Robert's Real Estate, and decided that I didn't want to work anymore at all. Been retired ever since. Do you have any questions?
Sure. Let's go back to when you were on Guam. What were living conditions like on Guam?
Well, we had, the crews were pretty much in tents, tent type structure, and the staff was in wooden buildings. I don't know, the commanding officer and myself and the navigator and our TJA and the gunnery officer, the navigator, we were all in one wooded type of thing. We had the tree rats. We got rats that live in trees, and they'd come running through the barracks every other thing.
It must have been rather startling.
Yeah, and we had a great big, like a leather thing was full of water, and that was for our cold showers and cold drinking water. They'd fill it up once a day. Food, terrible. But these 3 thieves I had there, we unloaded they got a hold of a Navy landing craft, I think it was. There was a ship parked out off the harbor there that was loaded with beef. And then we got that landing craft and went out there and outfit had a had a good meal one weekend. We built a Quonset hut for the enlisted men for clubhouse. I built a softball field. We got a bulldozer and we carved out a softball field. I got or they did, they got a power unit. They got a tent to put over the power unit so nobody'd see it. We put up poles. The Navy gave us, brought us poles and even set them up for us. And we took these Christmas tree lights, we called them, that they used on the runways for working at night. We had that thing lit up better than Yankee Stadium. And we had the only softball field on Guam, I guess. And I had they didn't have any lights up at the wing headquarters. And I had a major come down one day and said he was going to take my unit. I said, Major, we got a 1,000-foot drop off the end of the runways there. That's where you can go get it if you get serious. And he never came back.
Was it very crowded on Guam?
No. Of course, there were a lot of civilians there, and they were tremendous. They hated the Japs, boy, oh boy. And we were not allowed to go into any of the villages or anything unless we had special permission. We got, one day another guy and I were going to go and see the chief of this one unit. And when we got there, they had a hand pump for water, old-fashioned hand pump. And when we walked up to the hut, there were bare floor huts, I saw the woman out there with a papaya, and she was washing and washing in that thing. It was going to be clean for us. And while we were there, somebody came to the chief and he excused himself, grabbed a great big old knife and took off in the jungle. And they heard that there was a Jap back in there. I don't think they found him, but they would go out to kill him. And the Japs used to Rhoda was another island that was rowboat a distance away. And we left that one alone. The Navy used to go over and bomb the runway every day to keep it broken up. But the Japs would come ashore and get on our chow line. We had to issue special permits after a while to keep them out. They'd steal the uniform and they'd get right in the chow line because they looked a lot like the Guamanians. And we found out the Japs were getting food that way. And I can remember another story about officer was driving a Jeep to go down to the port down the island a ways. And he picked up a hitchhiker. And a little ways on further, he picked up a Guamanian. And he asked the Guamanian where he wanted to go, and he told him, he said he wanted to go to April Harbor, but he said, I don't know where that Jap soldier in the back is going. But, and we did have a Japanese prison on the island there too. They made them work on the roads and that stuff. Of course, when we first got over there, the road from April Harbor up to our field, Northwest Field, it was just a place through the jungle. But by the time we got ready to leave, they had it all blacktop. There was quite a highway down there.
So what was a typical mission like?
Well, it was long, of course. You know, you got 3,000 miles of water to fly up there. And once the radar operator told you he's picking up the coast of Japan, then the butterflies started. Because you didn't know what you're going to run into. And one mission that I was on. I don't know how many, but there was quite a few fighters making passes at us, but not shooting. We had the back of the plane all black, and we were flying in the clouds, cloud cover. And whether they they couldn't get they knew we were there, but they didn't know just where, and they'd shoot blindly. You'd see the tracers flying, but we had on one mission, I don't remember which one, we came under a lot of fighter fire, and we didn't have a dent on the plane. And of course, we cautioned our gunner in the tail not to shoot unless he had somebody right on our tail, not to fire, because that would give us away. But the Japs never found out that we didn't have guns. We were always scared of that, always afraid that that was going to show up.
So you always flew at night?
Always at night, always in cloud cover.
And about what altitude?
Well, we fly, I think 12 was about the lowest and 18 was about the highest.
What kind of bomb load?
4,500 pounders, most of the time. Sometimes we'd carry 100 pounders and special firebomb type things. And then you'd hook 5 bombs together on one hanger.
And you flew against refineries,
Yeah.
oil production
Yeah,
facilities.
all of that.
Tell me about this last mission we were talking about before.
Well, that was to Akita, which was way up on the northeastern end, I guess, or northwestern end of Japan, way up on the tip. And everybody thought that the war was going to be over any minute. And they had a key code word that you would get if the surrender had come. And I think it was 3 times they would start their engines, and then somebody would drive up in a Jeep and they'd shut them down. And then somebody would come by with another Jeep and they'd start them up. But I think 3 times they did that, started. And of course this was going to be a long mission, and it was going to tax the fuel supply. And that stuff all didn't help any, starting those engines up all the while. Then they got off and they went on up, and they bombed, they went across Tokyo and blacked it out. They went on up and dropped their bombs, and came on back, and on the way home they found out that the thing was over. Well, then they were all worried about the fact that whether they were going to have gas enough to get back to Guam. And they thought about stopping at Iwo and picking up gas, but then the engineer said that he thought they had enough to get back, and they did. Then after it was over, then we started flying mercy missions to Japanese camps and dropping supplies to them. And I went on one to Mukden, Manchuria, and it had sort of a half of a circle of rooms like, and a center courtyard. And we had to put those things down in that courtyard. And the way they did it, they put in a plywood flooring in the bomb bays, 2 of them, and loaded the supplies on top of those and dropped them. And I can see when we first came over that thing and looked in Manchuria, all those guys, just skin and bones, come out on those porches, and the first guy dropped his supplies, and they all ran out in the courtyard, and we had to go in right on the deck and try to wave them off, because we couldn't drop those platforms on them. And I couldn't get mine to, I couldn't get the, had to drop the rear bomb bay first because we'd have too much load in the back if we dropped the front one. I couldn't get that back bomb bay to work. And we made several passes and we came home with a load of material. And then we were running out of gas because that was a long haul. And so we landed on Okinawa, and it was the night they were flying the troops into Japan, and they just waved us off the runway, get over there and shut her down and go to bed, because they didn't want us to, take up any time, and they were not about to refuel us. So I slept out on the wing and at night while the planes were taking off, taking those people in. And then the next day we got refueled and came on back to Guam. And believe me, I sweat. They put a couple of jacks on the lowest platforms and tried to drop it, and it didn't go.
Back on interview of Preston M. Cran's second part. Preston, you were talking about you were flying the second mission to relieve the POW camp at Mukden.
It was the first mission in Mukden.
Well, after you came back and had a layover at Iwo, you were flying back?
Yeah, we landed back at Guam, and they checked that plane out, and it wouldn't drop the platform. So I was happy. A couple of years ago, I saw where the Mukden prisoner of wars were holding a reunion somewhere. So I called the guy up, and I wanted to find out what they were thinking, when they saw B-29s coming over. But he had been transferred out of that prison to another one at the time, and so I couldn't get any information from him. He wanted me to come to the reunion, but I just couldn't go. But it was
Did you ever run into any other Mukden survivors?
No, never did.
Do you know what the Japanese were doing at that camp?
Do I know what they were doing? Oh, I don't know what they were doing other than mistreating.
Besides the regular mistreatment, that was the camp the Japanese used our prisoners as guinea pigs for biological and chemical war.
That's where they were doing it. Well, I heard from somebody, I don't know, a few years after, that they couldn't understand because that morning the guards all disappeared. And that's why they were all out on those porches. But I did see the Great Wall of China flying back.
It must have been quite a sight.
Oh, it was. Boy, that's something. But on the way back, of course, it was a long haul, and on the way up, we flew over where they dropped the first bomb, Hiroshima, and that was some sight. It looked like somebody took a broom and swept the sand, just here and there, chimney standing up. And we saw that on the way up, but I never forget seeing those guys. We were right down on the deck. We probably weren't over 100 feet high. And, they were just skin and bones. And there was an air base right near the prison there that the Japanese had there. And when we flew past that thing, every plane on that ramp out there had a red star on it.
Let's go a little further back when you were in charge of the bomb training departments. Tell me, what was a bomb trainer?
Well, it was a platform, I think it was 12 feet high. And the cadets had a seat up there like a chair, and he had his bomb sight right in front of him. First you had a stabilizer, and then you had the bomb sight in the stabilizer. And It had two big wheels in the front and a single wheel in the back that would turn it. It was electrically powered, and they turned that thing on and it would move forward at a steady pace, or you could turn it. Then you had what we called a bug that was over here off to the side, and that bug would travel across the floor. And it had a sheet of paper on the top of it with circles and a dot in the center. The bomb sight also had a plunger down at the height of that bug, that when you triggered the thing, that plunger would go down and hit that target, and you'd see how far off they were. Because out on the range, we had a 300-foot circle, a 200-foot circle, a 100-foot circle, and then in the front we had a little wooden shack, and that was the target. And the other six showed you, because we had somebody take a picture when that bomb hit, and it would show you how far off target you were. But when the trainer, this bug would go across the floor, and you'd have to steer that trainer to it, try to hit that plunger on that target.
Was it difficult to do?
Well, if you could do what you're supposed to, you could hit it all right. It would be difficult if you didn't do things right. You had two double knobs on the sight, and you had to turn one with one hand, one with the other, and you had a trigger on there. And you had indices. That the sight I don't know just how to explain it. The sight crosshairs would move, and you could move the crosshairs left to right or forward and back, and you had to judge your speed, your direction, and when you got up there in a little rough weather, the plane would bounce around, but that thing would kind of stay pretty steady. It would deviate some, but it would stay pretty steady. And once you started down the bomb run, you went on automatic pilot, and the Bombardier controlled the direction of the plane. The pilot held it on a steady platform as far as up and down is concerned, and as far as airspeed is concerned, because your airspeed had to remain constant. So the pilot controlled that, but the Bombardier controlled the back and forth of the plane. That's why when you were just flying, you'd put it on automatic pilot and go to sleep. It would stay right on course. But it was a combination of the pilot and the Bombardier control, but the Bombardier had control of the plane, really.
Were there any special security requirements you had involving the bomb sight?
Well, yeah. First long, it was top secret. When I carried a bomb sight out the plane, I was armed, and I was carrying it in a bag, closed, and even the bombardiers couldn't go in the bomb vault or the bomb mechanic area. When I went through Bombardier school, they didn't have a bomb sight. We couldn't take any notes. All that they'd do, they would print something on a wall or on a canvas and then erase it. But we couldn't even we couldn't take any notes. And when I was in Victorville, now this was early '41, I went down to the railroad station one day for something, and there sat a Norden bomb sight on one of these big wheel things, you know, they used to have like a railway. There's a Norden bomb sight.
Just sitting in the open?
Just sitting right out in the open. I called the MPs, and I stayed right by it, and I called the MPs, and they came down and took it, and I don't know who got it, but somebody got it, I'm sure of that. But we carried it, we had to be armed, and we carried it in a bag at all times. And nobody could get in an airplane with a bomb sight on it.
Did they make you take an oath to...
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We had 3 bomb sites at the time. We had the Norden, we had Sperry, and we had one that we called National Cash Register. I never worked a Sperry. I did work the National Cash Register, but the Norden was the bomb site. That was the most accurate. You could, if you could really do your job, you could almost put it on that target. I put it on it a couple of times. I put it on it one night in a hell of a storm. We were bouncing all over the sky, and the plane was up like this when I threw the bomb out. I figured the target was down here. I must have aimed it off there, and the thing hit the target. I don't know how it did.
When you were flying over Japan, you were normally bombing by radar?
Yeah, all of our the radar operator. He set up the line of flight. He knew where the target was, and he'd get you that. The Bombardier had to control the distance from and to the target so that you released it at the right point so it would hit the target. And what happened over there, to start, when the other outfits, the other B-29s were coming over from China, they couldn't hit the ground. At that time, nobody knew about the jet stream. And they were up in the jet stream, and you drop a bomb here, and it might land way over there somewhere. And they weren't successful at all in their bombing. But what we did is that we sent a plane up to fly to the target and then fly back towards us and tell us the wind directions and the speed and so forth and so on. And that's how they discovered the jet stream up there. They were flying so high, they were up in that jet stream, and that was different than what was going on down the ground.
You ever feel any qualms about what happened when you dropped the bombs on the ground?
Not a bit, not a bit. They were the enemy, and they were doing a lot of bad things. They did a lot of bad stuff to us. Pearl Harbor, but that was their own fault.
Were you ever concerned about being shot down over Japan?
Not really. When I was young, I never figured I'd live to be 30. Because as I say, I started flying airplanes in 1936, and I had Harley Davidsons and drove cars as fast as they'd go. After I left Randolph, a guy came up to Germantown. We had a yacht base in there with a float plane, and of course, everybody, all my peers there, so I thought I was full of baloney about being able to fly. And so this guy said, "Come on, take a flight." So we got out there. He said, "Now you got a rudder off that back float to steer it out, and before you take off, just pull on that wire there and lift that float up." He says, "Go ahead, get it up on the step and take off." Well, I had never flown a float plane, so I watched that step, and I got it up on the step, and I took it off and flew around, made some turns and stuff like that, and he said, "Now go down back in and land it." So I did, and put it down good, taxied back in. Then he told me, he said, "Anytime you want to fly and I'm not here, just go ahead."
Did you ever fly after the war?
No. I'd stop, I'd go by and I'd working with General Motors, I drove all over New York, Vermont, and the little northern half of New Hampshire. I go by an airfield and I'd stop and pull in, and I thought, I can't afford this. So I never did. I did, after the war was over, a couple of days, we had to fly this one plane, that colonel, my squadron, we had to fly over Truck Island and take a look and to see whether, you know, there were any Japanese there or anything like that. And we did, and we were coming home, and I got up in the co-pilot seat, and the colonel let me fly. I got back in there at Guam, and he said, "Do you want to land it?" I said, "I think you better check with the rest of the crew." So he did, and they said, "Sure, let him go." So I got a B-29 landing, and I greased it. But riding a motorcycle, driving a car, flying an airplane, I guess I was just a natural. That's why I got a lot of hours flying in the Air Force, Army Air Force, because the pilots knew I could fly, and they'd take a break. I've flown a lot of hours on incidents, which I'd like to do because I like to practice it.
Looking back now, after all these years, you proud of what you did?
Oh, sure.
Think it changed your life any?
No, I don't think so. I've always had a love for the Air Force, and I'd like to take a ride in a fighter today, but I don't think my body would take it.
I don't know if mine would.
You get too many G's. I don't think I could take it.
Anything else that, after all these years, comes back to you, or your most vivid memories of the war?
Well, Pearl Harbor was a bad day. We were at a party, 4 or 5 of us, at some girl's house, I don't know who it was. And we heard it on the radio that Pearl Harbor had been hit. And they kept saying that all personnel report back to the base, and we said, hell, we don't have a rifle on the base and not full of cosmoline, and what's the sense of going back to the base? We might as well enjoy the party. So we waited for a while, and then we went back, and then we couldn't get off the base again for a while, because we knew that was going to happen. We were cadets at Jim. But when I went over to Guam, we flew over. And I flew over Pearl Harbor. We landed in Hawaii. We flew from California to Hawaii the first night. And next morning when we left there, we flew over Pearl Harbor. Oh boy, it was a devastating sight. And we had to land on Kwajalein on the way over to Guam for fuel. And Kwajalein was shaped like a horseshoe, and the runway was from the water here to the water here, and it wasn't too long. It was long enough, but you wanted to get down right on the first end of the runway, or you'd run in the ocean on the other. But we'd already called in for landing instructions, and they called us off, and they said, we've got a fighter up there with a bomb hanging. And here was this fighter plane with, it had released at one shackle, but it was hanging by the other, and it was hanging nose down. And he was up there trying to shake it off, and he couldn't. So I guess they told him to bail out, and he wasn't interested in that. And he went in, and he put it down hard, and that bomb came loose. And he's going down the runway, and that bomb is cartwheeling right down alongside him, and he's got all the power he can get out there trying to get the hell off. But the bomb never did go off, so probably the pin is still stuck in it or something that didn't come off. But I imagine he had changed his clothes. And then we were flying from Fairmont to Orlando, Florida, in a B-17, and we spent a month in in Puerto Rico flying overwater heights, flights 3,000 miles for training. But we had a group that and we were going down on the B-17 to Orlando and then on into Puerto Rico. We took off in a heavy fog at about 12 o'clock at night out of Fairmont. And I'm sitting in the nose, and I saw the runway lights disappear. And the next thing I saw was a runway light. And we hit. And we bounced in the air, and then the pilot held it off. Well, we couldn't take any kind of chances trying to go back into Fairmont in that fog, so we went on to Orlando. And we got down to Orlando, and we came in and made a pass. We had told the tower that we had wheel trouble. And the pilot did a good job this time. Of course, I called him everything I could think of back at Fairmont. But he just greased it in both wheels, just flipped right back. We went on around again, and then they got all the emergency equipment out and everything, and brought it in on the belly. But he did a good job there. He greased it in, and of course the emergency people were right alongside the runway with us, going right up the runway. As soon as we stopped, they had the foam on us. And but the plane broke right where the ball turret, the bottom ball turret post was up to there. The plane broke off right there. It didn't come off, but it just broke. But yeah, all of us got out of there. Not a scratch or anything else. So we had to stay there until I think we were there 5, 6 days, something like that, till they got another plane to come in and could pick us up and take us on to Puerto Rico. But they set up a court-martial for the pilot for a rough landing. And those jokers looking at that stuff knew those wheels had taken a rough shot. And I said to the pilot, to his attorney, I said, he didn't make a rough landing. I said, go ask those people who were on the emergency vehicles that were going right up the runway with us. So they went in and all swore he didn't make a rough landing. He made a beautiful landing. He got off. But they were right. They knew those wheels had taken a hard shot, but it wasn't on the landing, it was on the takeoff. And nobody saw that back there in the fog.
Well, Press, we're just about out of time.
Okay.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. I think I've talked enough, went on enough.
Great. Well, thank